entrepreneurs over the years. What is the best qualities of an entrepreneur? What are the qualities most necessary to be a successful entrepreneur from your vantage point now, 38 years later?
Well, I always say that the two absolutely essential qualities that you have to be an entrepreneur in the first place is total confidence and complete ignorance, because you, on the one hand, you have to have a tremendous faith in yourself that regardless of what circumstances you put yourself into, that you will be able to succeed in those circumstances. But on the other side, they haven't done much research. I find, generally speaking, entrepreneurs kind of create their own conditions. So they don't do a lot of analysis up front of the situations that they're getting into, but they kind of innovate on the run. And I think what entrepreneurs do is they have just enough information to know that they might be able to pull something off, and they jump for it. And consequently, they have a lot of failure in their lives. And the best entrepreneurs, Darren, that I've really seen are the people who have an amazing ability to fail fast. They have an ability to get out there, make a failure, turn around very, very quickly, correct themselves, and jump to the next level. And to a certain extent, their success is actually a series of corrected failures.
So, there's a couple lessons there. It's number one, it's okay to fail. And then number two is, if you do, recover quickly and move on. So let's go on the flip side of this then, Dan. What are the most common constraints or shortcomings that you see of most entrepreneurs?
They're too impatient to be great. And what I mean by that is that generally entrepreneurs are fairly fast thinkers. And there's an interesting book out by Daniel Kalman, and it's becoming very famous in entrepreneurial circles right now. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. And he said to be really successful in life, you've got to have a combination of fast thinking, which is very intuitive. You just in an instant see a possibility, and entrepreneurs generally can see the end in very, very bright colors, almost like that. They can sense what the end result of a new initiative might be, and they can emotionally commit themselves in an instant to something. But the problem is you also need systematic, deliberative thinking to actually, once you have the intuition, then you've got to put together a good game plan, and you've got to get the talents of other people involved. And that requires a much more systematic approach. And so the really great entrepreneurs combine both of them. But what I've seen, Darren, with so many entrepreneurs is that they're almost so cocky about their ability to think fast that they don't seek out and they don't team up with people who are the deliberative, systematic thinkers. And that's the greatest weakness, and that's the greatest failure that I've seen over the years. And I'm in the first category. I'm a very, very fast thinker, and I see opportunities just like that. But what I've surrounded myself with over the years is a whole team of people who are phenomenal at the backstage. They're phenomenal with the deliberative, systematic thinking, getting the organization and the delivery right. And I've never seen a great entrepreneurial company that didn't have the combination of those two. On the other hand, you have organizations that just have an enormous amount of deliberative, systematic thinking, but they never really can take advantage of marketplace opportunities because they almost systematize an opportunity to death before they even take advantage of it. So it's both skills are really required.
Excellent distinctions there. Now, Dan, I recently listened to an interview that you did with our friend Joe Polish, who will also appear in our Modern Marketing column, and you talked openly about the fact that every single entrepreneur is going to hit a ceiling in their entrepreneurial efforts. Explain why they will bump against the ceiling and then what they can do to get past it.
Well, actually, Darren, it has to do with their goals. So when you just start off as an entrepreneur, you have goals which are kind of related to just surviving for a lot of entrepreneurs. I just want to get up to a state where my business is paying for itself, So that's your really big goal. I can remember back in 74 when I went out on my own, I had left an ad agency. I was a writer with BBDO, big ad agency. And my goal was just to match the salary I'd had at BBDO. And it actually took me 8 years to do that. I had a terrible first 8 years as an entrepreneur. I was divorced. I was bankrupt. And, I'm talented. I'm creative. I'm imaginative. I'm a good writer. But I just didn't have a handle on the business cycle. So I hit my ceiling of complexity. And what a ceiling of complexity is where all your time is filled up with activity, and there's no more room left in your system. So, for me, it was just getting up to $20,000 in the late 70s and early 80s. But, and to me, that was my greatest goal. And then I got up there and, I kind of hit a ceiling in the sense that I had run out of future because my future was only getting up to $20,000. And I can remember plateauing. I was using up all my time during the year, and I was just, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, I was at the same place. And then I realized that I really, really had to go bigger. And that's the first time that I really got the notion that if you're going to have a decent goal, make it a 10 times goal because it gives you a lot of room to grow. And what a 10 times goal does is that it actually forces you to rethink and rearrange everything you're doing, because a lot of people can go double just by working harder and working longer. But if you go 10 times, you really have to really have to think everything totally from top to bottom, a completely new business model. So right from the beginning in the early 80s, I've always had this 10 times framework for looking at a bigger goal for yourself. And that way you just give yourself an enormous amount of opportunity to learn, but also you have to really tell the truth about just the 2 or 3 things that you are really great at, and then to go looking for all the other skills that are necessary.
Well, since you brought up this 10 times formula, which was also the topic for your column that will appear in the print edition of Success Magazine this month, you say that entrepreneurs should be looking for multipliers in their business. Explain what a multiplier is and how we as entrepreneurs can identify them, and then why we should be looking at them with 10x numbers.
Well, all the success that an entrepreneur has, Darren, is really a function of 2 things, productivity and profitability. Productivity simply means that you're getting the same result in far, far less time, or you're getting a much bigger result in the same amount of time. And profitability means that you're making a lot more money, but you're keeping what you're making. It's not being used up in cost. Darren, I've personally coached 6,000 entrepreneurs since 1974, so I've really seen entrepreneurs in an incredible number of different situations, but the essential fact is that they all run out of future at a certain point and they start plateauing. There's a lot of resistance to it because it just doesn't seem possible when you first hear it. And yet we live in a world where, because of technology, we're seeing multipliers all over the place. I mean, the microchip itself increases 128 times every 10 years, the power of the microchip. Well, that impact on society is just creating some incredible big businesses. I mean, just look at the high-tech businesses that simply didn't exist 25 years ago now, and they're the most prominent businesses in the world. Google and, Facebook and Apple and all the vast range, Amazon and everything. Well, this is, those businesses are all a function of taking advantage of multipliers. First of all, there's the technological multiplier, but then you work backwards and it's a teamwork multiplier. But then it's just how the entrepreneur himself or herself just thinks about themselves. And my feeling is that the safest goal that you can have right now is actually a 10 times goal. To have a 2 times goal, you're actually going to get into trouble. And we may want to go into that a little bit, but I think a 2 times goal is actually a dangerous goal. I think a 10 times goal is actually a much safer goal. And the reason is that with a 2 times goal, you may be just trying to push what you're already doing into the future. and you're not really looking deeply enough at what's actually going on in your business. You're not actually checking out your value creation proposition in the marketplace. You're not looking for new technology. You're not looking for higher quality skills to surround yourself with. But with 10 times, you have no other choice, because you're saying, I got to really think differently if I'm going 10 times, which seems really strange. But once you get on this way of thinking, all of a sudden, you start just noticing an incredible number of opportunities and resources and capabilities out in the world that are there, but you just never saw them before because you never had a goal that was big enough for them to be useful to you.
Excellent. Now, you talked about productivity, so there's a couple of productivity concepts that I've picked up from you that I really like. So I want to ask you about those two here. The first one is called the Entrepreneurial Timeline System that suggests chunking your activities into 3 different kinds of days. Explain that to our listeners.
Yeah, one of the things I did before I was in advertising, I was in entertainment. And if you look at entertainers, they have a completely different time system. They have, most people have work days and they have weekends and they have vacations, but entertainers have a completely different system. And they have like whole days, and one of the days is, a day that's really devoted to putting on a show or playing a game, and pretty well their energies for that day are really used up with delivering a performance to the public. Okay, so that's a performance day, or a productivity day, if you will. The second day that they would have is that they have rehearsal days or they have practice days. So they're getting ready to perform. And generally, they don't do those two things on the same day. They'll have a whole day for practice, and then they'll have a completely separate day for delivering their performance to the public. And then they get a lot of free time, and, they just take off and they rest and they rejuvenate. So, I began looking at this and I say, who are the most highly paid performers in the world? And they're all entertainers. And these highly paid individuals all have a completely different time system than, most people just go in at 9 and they work till 5, 6, 7, whatever time it is. They put in 5 days or they put in 6 days. And then they have a day which is supposed to be a rest day, but it's just a kind of a relief day. And then they're back at it, and they do 40 or 50 of those a year. And what it means is that they're all marathon runners. And marathon runners can't run full out at any given time during the marathon. They have to just conserve their energy. And so you get a very, what I would say, medium, some people are great marathoners, but the average person is just a sort of a plotter. So most people just have plotting type businesses, and a lot of entrepreneurs get into this. It's just one day after another. There's no real difference from one day to the other. But the really great entrepreneurs really have, a certain number of days out of 365 that are just high performance days. They might have 40 or 50 of them in a year. And virtually all their results get created. And we call those focus days. A focus day is where you're just focused on, the results, which is money. And then you have what I call buffer days. And a buffer day is a day when you're getting ready and you're taking care of, in theater terms or performance, you're taking care of all the backstage issues to get ready for a performance day. So that's a rehearsal or a practice day, or making sure everything is right for the performance. That's a buffer day. And then you have lots of free days. So in our system, it's not unusual for people to have 150, 180 free days a year out of 365, and then the rest of the year is spent working either in their performance days or their backstage days. So they have this upward productivity and profitability system, and they pay for their free time, they pay for great teamwork around them, but when they're on performance, they don't have to think about anything else, and it's a very, very powerful system.
I've started to adopt it, and it's great, because if you are just focused on focus, and that this time has been allotted for that, man, you could just go deep and get so much done in such a short, compacted period of time, and know that you got your buffer day, and then know that you also have calendared your free days, and to know that there's a place on your calendar for each of those just optimizes your performance in each one of those three areas, including time off. Optimizing your performance of time off is important.
Yeah, I look a year ahead, and I can know within 90% exactly what every one of my days is going to be a full year ahead. And then when you have that much forethought, then you can maximize the amount of teamwork and the amount of delegation that you can have around it.
So here's another one, Dan, the no office solution. Tell us about that one.
I think that offices are the place where most people are least productive. And first of all, with the exception of some real neatniks, most people really have a messy office. They have unfinished projects all over the place. There's paper all over the place. The drawers are filled with stuff. They walk in to their office in the morning and they look at everything they have to do and they automatically get depressed. So I always say that an office is where entrepreneurs go to hide from opportunity. The least important work that they do in their office. The vast majority of entrepreneurs are great salespeople. They're out selling customers, they're out selling clients, or they're selling to their team. They're selling the vision of the company to their team, none of which requires an office. And I think it's sort of a inferiority complex. I think offices for entrepreneurs, because when you first start as an entrepreneur, it's hard to convince the world that you're a serious business. And so people say, well, if I have an office and I have a big desk, people are going to take me serious. But it's kind of a carryover from, corporations, and there's no two worlds that are more radically different than a corporation and an entrepreneurial firm. So I haven't had an office in over 20 years. I've got, two main offices, one in Toronto and one in Chicago. And, you can spend all day looking there for Dan's office. But what I have is I just have a cafe or a bistro in both of those companies, and there's tables all over the place, and I just go in and do my work.
Yeah. And if you ask people where they get their best ideas, it's usually, in the shower, it's in the car, it's on a run. They never say in my office.
No, they get depressed in their office. They get discouraged in their office. They get bogged down with complexity in their office. So I just tell people, why don't you just get rid of your office altogether? You can have the room, you can have the space, put in a nice round table. I really have a liking for round tables. And, put in 4 really nice chairs, have art on the wall, have plants there. Don't have desks, don't have shelves, don't have anything you can put any stuff on. And at 5 o'clock that night, it should be absolutely clean for tomorrow's starting off with an absolutely clean space. I just think having mess around you interferes with clear thinking and interferes with creativity.
Very, very interesting. Now, you have a process called the strategy circle, and it's described as a deceptively simple process that helps solve endless challenges. So talk to us about that.
Well, I'll tell you, if you took all my business away from me, Darren, you took all my company away from you. We have a $25 million company, and you took it all away from me today, and you blindfolded me, and you flew me and dropped me off in Hong Kong. I'll tell you, with the strategy circle, I could make $1 million in the first year. You could drop me on the street, and a year from now, I'd make $1 million. And it's a process that I came up with in 1982, and I teach all my entrepreneurial clients. I can take anything that somebody does, and I simply say, what's your goal? And they'll state what your goal is. Going to take Success Magazine, and we're going to take the readership, the monthly readership, we're going to take it up 1 million. Okay, and I say, okay, now what date would you like to have that? And you put that down as 3 years. 3 years from now, we're going to be 1 million up. And then I would say to you, tell me what's true on that day. Your readership just went up by 1 million. Tell me what else is true because of that. And you would go say, well, because of that, this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true. And what I get you to do is just talk about that day when that goal has been achieved, the actual results. And I say, okay, let's talk about everything that doesn't work in your company that would oppose that goal. And then we'll spend, half hour, and we'll just go through everything in your situation right now that would not support an increase in readership. of a million per month. And then I'd say, okay, we got them out here. Let's get the 10 biggest obstacles. And we do that. And I say, okay, let's pick them off one by one. What's something you can do in the next week for this one? What's one you can do for that? And then you start a process of week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter, of taking all the obstacles and actually turning them into the strategies that actually take you up by that amount. And I have to tell you, Darren, I've taught 80-year-olds how to do this, and I've taught 6-year-olds how to do that. The human mind just totally understands this process.
Now, here's another concept that I'd like to pass on to our listeners, and it's what's called the R factor. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, the R factor, R stands for relationship, and you can't sell anything to anybody until you first sold them on a relationship. A lot of people, they stock up on product knowledge, they stock up, they become super experts on things, and they try to sell something, a product or a service, and they overwhelm the other person with facts, but the truth of the matter is that they haven't sold the other person that the other person actually wants to have a relationship with you. And by that I mean that they feel confident, they feel comfortable, they have a sense of trust. And so I came up with a question, and the question I've already used in our conversation, and that is, and I just use it. It's a time reference question. I say, Darren, if we were meeting here and it was 3 years from today, and you're looking back over the 3 years, back to today, what has to have happened over that 3-year period for you to feel happy with your progress, both personally and professionally? And then I shut up. I don't say anything. Now, one of two things is going to happen when I ask that question. Person's going to answer or they're not going to answer. If they answer, they've just told me that they accept the relationship. They don't know what I'm offering yet, but they have sized me up. There's an estimate that human beings size each other up in about 10 seconds. You meet someone and you size them up, and there's a meter that says trust, do not trust. And generally speaking, by the time people get to the 10-second mark, they've made a decision about whether they trust the person or don't trust them. If they don't trust them, they don't answer the question. If they answer the question, they trust them. If they don't trust you, then they're never going to trust you for whatever reason. And my feeling is that there's no reason why you should spend any more time if you're selling in a situation where you've determined in the first 10 seconds or, the first minute or the first 5 minutes that someone doesn't trust you. There's no sales pitch that you're going to give that person that in any way, shape, or form is going to get you to trust them if in the first 10 seconds they don't trust you. So you want to know right off the bat, do they trust? Is there a ball game today or no ball game? Is it canceled, Mm-hmm. So it gets canceled right up front. But here's what happens. If they trust you, they will talk forever. They will sit there for 15 minutes, half hour, and they will answer your question. And the reason why they'll answer your question is because no one else in their life has ever asked them that question. That no one else has ever just asked them, what is it that is going to make them happy with their progress? A lot of people ask them what's going to make them happy, but nobody asks them what's going to make them happy with their progress. And so what the R factor, the relationship factor question really does is it establishes right up front, look, this is going to be totally about you, but in order for me to really help you, I'm going to have to know what's up with you. If the person says, well, I'm not going to give you that kind of information, we just met, I says, well, actually, I said, you've just given me a great deal of information. You've just given me the information that you're never going to work with me. And I want to thank you for that information right up front because it's going to save you a lot of time and it's going to save me a lot of time. And I shake his hand and I leave. I've got to get on to people who really trust me that I can really do some useful work for. So that's the R factor.
Excellent. So before I let you go, Dan, I have to hit you on the referability habits. So I want you to talk us through what the 4 habits are. But before, I want to challenge our listener with not whether you know these things, but ask yourself whether you do these things and you do them out of habit. So talk to us about the referability habits.
Well, referability is one of those great multipliers in the world, and that is that great people are saying great things to other great people about you. That's really what referability is. When somebody else says something great about you, it's incredibly more powerful than when you're saying something great about yourself. So what I've looked at over the years, I've seen people who are incredibly talented, far more talented than I am, who don't do well. I've seen people who are very smart, they're very knowledgeable, they're masters of their field, who don't do well in business. And so I began analyzing, on the surface, they look like winners, but they're not winning, so why aren't they winning? And what I discovered is that they're just not referable. And when you examine the lack of referability, it comes down to just 4 things. They don't show up on time. I would say that the moment that you're more than half a minute late for a meeting, you just lost 50% of your credibility. So I always show up early, and first of all, I'm rested, I'm relaxed, I'm focused, and it's a sign of enormous respect for the other person just to show up on time. So you show up on time. The other thing is you do what you say. If you tell somebody you're going to do something for it, do it for them. Or get back to them and said, I thought I was going to do this and I want to tell you why I can't, so I'd like to talk to you again. It's not so much that you're going to be 100% and doing everything you said, but you're going to get back, and if you have to go and change a promise that you've made, get back and actually change. People really, really respect that. So show up on time, do what you say. The other thing is finish what you start, and we love people who just finish what they start. They start it, they go through it, and they finish it. They might not have liked it, but on the other hand, they finish it, and we trust people who finish what they start. And then the fourth one is people who say please and thank you. They just are always very gracious, and they're very grateful about the way they go about things. So show up on time, do what you say, finish what you start, and say please and thank you.
Excellent. I hope everybody hears this, because it sounds very simple, but in practice, it just is. I'm just amazed at how many shortcomings people run into as a result of not just following up on these 4 very simple but very profound trust building, reliability creating habits that just make all the difference in the world. So I appreciate you sharing this with us. So the last question for you today, Dan, I just want you to leave us with some great coaching advice. If a new entrepreneur, someone who's just starting out, who still has a lot to learn, and they got their courage and they got the proper amount of ignorance, and if they walked up to you and asked you for your very best tip to get them started, what would you tell them to set them on the right path?
Well, what I would like them to do is identify 10 individuals that they would really like to have as customers or clients, and just ask that individual whether they can pay for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And you go out there and you just ask the person to tell their life story. You sit down at lunch and say, could you just tell me how you got started? And for an hour or 2 hours, and the longer it goes, the better, you just keep asking them questions about, how they got started, where they are now, but especially, at your stage, what are you excited about in the future? The number one rule during the 2 hours, you can't talk about yourself, and you can't talk about your business, and you can't in any way try to sell them anything. And you do it with 1, and you do it with 2, and you do it with 3, and do it with 10. It's going to cost you 10 lunches, breakfasts, or dinners, so that's your marketing plan. You will be amazed if you do this in a very honest way of making it entirely about the person and asking the questions. Within about 3 months after you complete your 10th one, there will have been probably 10 opportunities that will have opened up to you, simply because these 10 individuals actually met someone who actually listens and asks good questions. And they don't have many of those people in their life. And they will start asking you all sorts of things about yourself, what you're trying to do, and they will open doors for you. And it's the easiest way in the world to actually get started in business.
What great advice. Mr. Dan Sullivan, you have definitely lived up to your great mythology. It's been a delight. I'm sure we're going to be hearing